Welcome to the webinar on single-use plastic bags. We have a very strong turnout for this webinar. Almost the entire state has a representative on the line today, which is certainly indicative of how important this topic is across the state. I'd like to thank our sponsor this morning, Beyond Green. Beyond Green is a US-based manufacturer of USDA-certified 100% natural compostable bags. They've been leading the way in innovative material technology, which helps to reduce single-use plastics and keep toxins out of our environment. With products made in the USA, Beyond Green provides municipalities with quality-controlled dog waste bags and dispensers, along with cutting-edge composting technology to support their community's environmental and social goals. You can follow them on Twitter at BioDogGradableBags. At the end of the presentation, our final slide will have information on how to reach the representatives of Beyond Green. We hope that you reach out to them. At the end of the presentations, we will have approximately a 10 to 15-minute question and answer period. And now, without any further housekeeping, I would like to introduce Stephen J. Aquario, NYS's Executive Director.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you very much, Jeanette. I appreciate everyone joining us this morning. As Jeanette Stanziano mentioned, this is a statewide webinar, an educational and information event put out by the New York State Association of Counties in conjunction with the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. I really appreciate everyone taking some time to talk about really what is single-use plastic bags. That's the purpose of today's webinar. In March of 2018, NYSAC hosted a webinar very similar to this with some similar speakers. And back in 2018, we talked about why plastic bags are a problem, and we wanted to take some reaction from the counties and also our partners in our communities, our very important partners, our retailers, and to discuss the different policies under consideration. Since that time, New York has now passed legislation that will ban most plastic carryout bags in certain retail establishments for certain purposes, beginning on March 1st, 2020. Counties and certain cities will also have the option to opt into a 5-cent fee on paper bags. And let me just repeat that because that's the most important question that we get in this office is counties and cities do not have to act, but if they choose to act in this space, they also have the option to opt into a 5-cent fee on paper bags, and the Department of Environmental Conservation representatives will discuss what that 5-cent fee is to go for. But today we've gathered a real diverse group of stakeholders as our speakers to educate our county officials about this new legislation and how it will affect their communities. We have representatives from the Department of Environmental Conservation. We have representatives of Suffolk County, of Ulster County, and industry. We have representatives from 2 large supermarkets who can give us their perspective from the retail side. At this time, I did want to recognize Governor Andrew M. Cuomo for his leadership in environmental policy. Governor Cuomo established a plastic bag task force who pretty much took the entire year last year. I was a member of that task force, and I got to know plastic bags inside and out, and the fine representatives of the Department of Environmental Conservation, the chairs of the environmental committees of the state legislature were engaged with that, as were other stakeholders as part of that plastic bag task force, which issued a final report. Some of the recommendations of that task force became the statute that we now know today. I did want to recognize Governor Cuomo for introducing that legislation into the state budget and establishing a policy for debate and ultimately passage. I would also like to thank the governor and members of the state legislature, the state senate, and the state assembly for respecting home rule powers and enabling counties to have some say or some role in this environmental policy, and that is where you saw the ability to establish a 5-cent fee, which many counties are saying no, they're not interested in. Some counties are saying we don't even need this law. Some counties are saying this is a fabulous idea. Regardless of how we feel about it individually, it clearly was a matter of state policy, state environmental policy, and we're very grateful that the issue was ultimately taken up by the state and not addressed in a patchwork fabric by counties who were acting, and you'll hear from Ulster County of what prompted Ulster to act and how that was affected when they took action to ban, the only county to ban and adopt a local law to ban single-use bags. So I did want to thank the legislature, and with us here today is Senator Jen Metzger of the 42nd Senate District, representing Delaware, Sullivan, and Orange counties. And we wanted to afford Senator Metzger, who's been a champion of this issue before she was elected to the New York State Senate, in the communities and also at the state level, listening to the concerns of local government and retailers, and ultimately a real leader in the New York State Senate on environmental policy, and in particular on this plastic bag issue. So let me turn it over to Senator Metzger, and thank you, Senator Metzger, for joining us today.
Thank you so much. I'm really appreciative of this opportunity to say a few words. I really want to thank the New York State Association of Counties for their leadership on this issue, on educating counties about it, and really giving all of the policy considerations, some real attention. Prior to joining the state Senate, I worked on this issue at the local level as well. I've been working more broadly to address single-use plastics and plastic waste that is unnecessary because of its environmental impacts. And my home county of Ulster has really been a leader not only on the single-use plastic bag ban, but also banning polystyrene takeout containers. And I know that other counties have been considering this single-use plastic bag ban as well. It's so impactful. You know, plastic waste is polluting our oceans, our rivers and streams. It's causing harm to wildlife. And in New York State, we use a whopping 23 billion bags, single-use plastic bags a year. So adopting statewide legislation was so important and will have a really positive impact on the environment. I come to the Senate. I'm a new senator, and I have been in local government for many years before that. And so I understand, appreciate, and believe in the importance of home rule. And so I share your sentiments that this legislation is important and that it gives counties authority over the aspect of charging a fee. I will say from my perspective that charging a fee is extremely important to realizing the full environmental benefits because it does incentivize people to bring reusable bags, which is really where we have to go. Studies have been done showing that, in the absence of a fee, people are more likely to use paper, which, is energy intensive, resource intensive, and brings with it its own environmental and energy issues. So I do hope that all of the counties will give a fee their consideration. And I just want to thank you for all that you're doing, and I really view the Association of Counties as well as the Association of Towns and all its members as real partners with us in the legislature. And please feel free to reach out to me anytime on this or any other issue. Thank you so much, and I look forward to hearing the webinar.
Okay, that was Senator Jen Metzger of the 42nd Senatorial District, representing Sullivan, Orange, and Delaware counties. Thank you, Senator Metzger. Jane McLaughlin, Kristen Clark, and Kayla Montagna are here from the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, and we will now turn it over to these representatives of the state to walk through the New York State Bag Waste Reduction Act. Jane?
Hi, Stephen. Thanks so much. Actually, you can go on to the first slide with some background. Great. So, obviously, plastic bags are a serious environmental concern, not just in New York State, across the globe. They're a major source of litter in our trees, our streets, our waterways. They pose harm to wildlife, natural resources. They oftentimes end up tangled in recycling machinery. They can cause damage to recycling infrastructure, which is quite costly to repair, and can shut down recycling operations for hours, even days. They're also derived from fossil fuels, which is a leading source of the world's global warming pollution. So, as residents, we see the negative impact of these single-use bags on a daily basis. And they have really been, not just a statewide problem, but a national as well as an international issue of concern. So in recognition of this problem and in an effort to reduce waste from single-use plastic bags, Governor Cuomo convened the New York State Plastic Bag Task Force back in February of 2017 to develop a report and explore legislative solutions to address the detrimental impact of plastic bags on the state's environment. And a link to a copy of that report is provided on this slide. Next slide, please. So it's estimated that New Yorkers use 23 billion plastic bags annually for an average time of 12 minutes per bag. So to help address the environmental issues associated with these bags, New York State enacted the New York State Plastic Bag Reduction, Reuse, and Recycling Act in 2009, which requires certain retailers to collect plastic bags for recycling. Through public outreach and education, the EC encourages the use of reusable bags and the proper recycling of plastic bags and film plastics. This law requires stores with 10,000 square feet or more retail space and chains which operate 5 or more stores with greater than 5,000 square feet of retail space and which provide plastic carryout bags to customers to establish an in-store plastic bag and film plastic recycling program. And that has been in effect since 2009. And initially just required certain stores to collect plastic bags for recycling. Ultimately, it was expanded back in 2015 to also include the collection and recycling of other film plastics. So, these store take-back programs are critical to the recovery system. But, due to the difficulties of recycling single-use plastic bags and the challenges of educating consumers on their recyclability, waste minimization of single-use plastic bags remain critical, and therefore New York State took decisive action this year as part of the state budget in enacting a statewide ban on single-use plastic bags. Next slide, please. So as part of the budget, a new Title 28 was created that prohibits the distribution of plastic carryout bags by retailers in New York State. So as of March 1st, 2020, retailers in New York State cannot distribute plastic bags to customers. And it's important to note that stores that are required to accept plastic bags for recycling under the Plastic Bag Reduction, Reuse, and Recycling Act must continue to accept plastic bags that are exempt from the ban, which we'll go over in the next couple slides. This is really meant to ensure that consumers continue to have a convenient means to recycle film plastic that are not covered by the ban. Next slide. So the new law defines plastic carryout bags as any plastic bag that is provided to a customer by a person required to collect tax that is not specifically exempted. The plastic bag ban is tied to the collection of sales tax, and therefore any retailer required to collect sales tax will not be able to provide plastic bags to their customers. If a retailer is not required to collect sales tax and is not a person required to collect tax, pursuant to the Bag Waste Reduction Act. So the distribution of those bags by a retailer who doesn't accept tax and not required to accept tax would not be prohibited under this new law. Next slide, please. So there are some bags that are specifically exempted. In the Reduction Act, any bags used to contain or wrap uncooked meat, fish, or poultry, to package bulk items such as fruits, vegetables, grains, or candy, used solely to contain food sliced or prepared to order, so those deli bags that are handed out at grocery stores, bags used solely to contain a newspaper for delivery to a subscriber, trash bags, food storage bags, garment bags, and other such bags provided by a pharmacy to carry prescription drugs, and then takeout bags that are handed out at restaurants. Next slide, please. So the law also allows counties and cities to enact local laws establishing a fee on paper carryout bags, and that is, of course, meant to incentivize the use of reusable bags. The fee must be 5 cents, so a county or city could not charge more or less. There is a definition in the law of a reusable bag, which is defined as a bag made of cloth or other machine washable fabric that is handled, or a durable bag with handles that is specifically designed and manufactured for multiple reuse. So it's important to note that if a locality has enacted a local law imposing a fee on regulating plastic carryout bags, that local law and fee will be preempted when the plastic bag ban goes into effect as of March 1st of 2020, because the law states that jurisdiction in all matters pertaining to plastic carryout bags is vested exclusively in the state. So as of March 1st, 2020, any previously enacted county or city law imposing a fee on paper carryout bags will need to be amended to be consistent with the state law banning the plastic carryout bags, which includes the fee amount of 5 cents and how the fee must be used by the county or city, which we will go over in the next couple slides. There is language in the law that allows town or village laws that are establishing a fee on paper carryout bags that are in existence prior to March 1st, 2020, and they may be quote-unquote grandfathered in, as we call it. However, if the county in which the town or village is located enacts its local law establishing the 5 cent fee on paper carryout bags, the town or village must amend its local law accordingly within a year and then cannot charge a 5 cent fee on paper carryout bags. This is an option, an local option. There's really no timeline for a county or city to adopt a fee, and the process for the adoption of any local laws is really governed by whatever rules are established at the local level. It's also important to note that a customer is not precluded from bringing their own bag to purchase goods and carry them out of the store, and they cannot be charged a fee on those bags. However, entities that collect sales tax obviously are prohibited from providing plastic carryout bags other than an exempt bag to its customers. Next slide, please. So if a county or city does enact a local law imposing a fee on paper bags, the receipt must show the fee paid by the customer. Under the law, the county or city keeps 2 cents from each 5 cent fee collected, which must be utilized to purchase and distribute reusable bags with priority given to low and fixed income communities. The remaining 3 cents is directed to the EPF generally, and distribution requirements beyond what's set forth in the statute have not been defined as of yet. So there's really no parameters as to the logistics of how the locality can use that funding, provided it is being dedicated to reusable bag distribution with priority given to lower fixed income residents. And there is a specific exception in the statute that says that consumers that are SNAP or WIC participants are not subject to the fee, so they cannot be charged the fee. Next slide, please. So, we've been, asked questions, well, what happens when a county and a city located within a county enacts local laws imposing a 5 cent fee on the paper carryout bags? So a customer cannot be charged duplicate fees, one by the county and one by the city. Rather, the fee established by the city will apply within the territorial limits of the city, but the county fee will not apply within the city. So if both the city and the county adopt that 5-cent fee, the 2 cents would go to the entity based on the store location where the fee was paid by the consumer. So, using Albany County and the City of Albany as an example, because our office happens to be located here, if both Albany County and the City of Albany enact local laws establishing a 5-cent fee on paper bags provided by retailers, and someone purchases items, for instance, at a grocery store located within the Albany city limits, that customer would be charged one 5-cent fee, and the 2 cents would be directed to the City of Albany. However, the county's fee would continue to apply outside the jurisdiction and city limits of Albany. Also worth noting, the state law preempts local action on plastic bags and provides a specific authority related to fees on paper. However, nothing in the state law actually precludes a flat-out local ban on paper carryout bags, and that applies to municipalities across the board. Next slide, please. And the law does provide some direction on how the fees are collected and then remitted to the counties and cities. The fees have to be reported and paid to the Department of Tax and Finance on a quarterly basis. And then on a monthly basis, the state comptroller pays 40% of the fee, so that's that 2 cents out of the 5, collected to the appropriate fiscal officer, and then the remaining 60% goes to the EPS. At the end of the fiscal year, any funds that have not been used by the municipality are going to be directed to the general fund for the purpose of purchasing reusable bags, again, with priority given to low or fixed income communities. And that's it. Next slide has our contact our names on it, and we can provide our contact information if there are any questions.
So who am I unmuting?
Okay, Jane, thank you. Thank you very much for a comprehensive walkthrough. Questions have come in, and I'm sure at the end, I want to encourage folks to send in questions from all across the state, because at the end of the webinar, if we're not able to address those questions, we would certainly like to capture them and issue a frequently asked question, an FAQ document that NYSAC will work with DEC and put out to everybody and post on our website so that folks know how to deal with the SNAP program. A lot of questions have come in with SNAP, and then other questions, as Jane was discussing, between a city and a county, both enacting that local law on the fee to establish a fee in a city and a county, questions about that. Also, questions have come in about reusable bag distribution and how counties can engage in that process. So please feel free to send in those questions. I do appreciate, Jane, the overview of the statute. And really this webinar is designed to discuss the law and not the reason behind the law or why it became the way it became. We're just trying to educate and inform on the statute, the law itself, on a go-forward basis, and not to dive into why it became the way it did in the very end of the process. So I do appreciate, Jane, the overview of this new statute. And one of our counties in Ulster County, and the chair of the Ulster County Legislature, Tracey Bartels, is with us here today. Tracey was kind enough to join us and to give an explanation of Ulster County's local home rule bill becoming the first in the state to adopt a local law to ban single-use plastic bags, give us some perspective about this issue in her community and on her board, some of the issues that came about from doing this. And here today to share that experience is the chair of the Ulster County Legislature, Tracey Bartels. Tracey.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you so much for having me. So we can advance the slide. Ulster County passed our legislation on September 18th, and it was signed into effect on October 19th. We subsequently amended it in February, and I'll talk about some of those nuances. And we locally call it the Bring Your Own Bag Act. Please advance. Please advance the slide. Thank you. So we had been actively debating plastic bags for more than a decade. Our first legislation was brought forward in 2006, subsequent legislation brought forward in 2009, and in earnest, we began the discussions in 2016 about what type of legislation we wanted to see happen. Our legislation came about after Suffolk had already passed, and I know we're going to be hearing from Suffolk, and some of the successes in Suffolk helped to inform and move our legislation forward. Please advance. One of the impetuses for the county-wide legislation was the fact that municipalities in Ulster County were moving toward passing a patchwork of legislation. The village of New Paltz had passed a ban only. The town of Marbletown was looking at hybrid legislation, and other municipalities were moving forward with individual legislation. And we were hearing from the business community concerns about stores being at particular disadvantage if they were facing potentially different legislation right across a town or a village line. So they were looking to the county to have some continuity countywide. Please advance the slide. A lot of this was covered by the DEC presentation in terms of what we were thinking about, but I can say that locally, Riverkeeper does an annual sweep that runs, as you know, down the Hudson River and through its tributaries. And we were looking at data and seeing the real effect of the plastic bags in our tributaries and in the Hudson River on a pretty regular basis. And nationally, the debate was reaching a point where it was moving the legislation. Again, I said we'd been discussing this for 10 years, but it was difficult to build a consensus. But because of the national and the regional discussion, based on Suffolk's success, the timing was right for Ulster. Next slide, please. As a part of our discussion, we engaged all of our local EMCs, environmental management councils, and environmental organizations such as Riverkeeper and Citizens Campaign for the Environment, which was a giant help in moving Ulster's legislation forward. Next slide, please. So Ulster's legislation is a hybrid legislation that's very similar to what's just been passed by the state. In Ulster, we banned all plastic bags. We put a 4 ml threshold on the ban. The state ban has no threshold, so it's more inclusive. Next slide, please. We exempted, our bags are point of sale bags only, so we exempted garment bags, pharmacy prescription bags, and the types of bags that you use in the supermarket to just put your produce in. Those were our only exemptions in our legislation. Next slide, please. The fee component in Ulster County was also set at a minimum of 5 cents. We allowed stores to charge more than 5 cents, and they are required to indicate the number of the bags on the receipt, but the monies collected in the Ulster County legislation will be retained by the stores. Next slide, please. In terms of the covered stores for Ulster County, this was a big point of debate, and at some point we decided to go broad. We began by initially looking only at size of stores over a certain square footage, but ultimately we decided to cover all retail sales with the exception of restaurants. Restaurants are exempted, and the New York state law is substantially similar. Next slide, please. So in terms of the hybrid, we looked to municipalities across the country, and we saw sustained success, most notably out west, California, Los Angeles, San Jose. They had substantial reduction, and it was sustained reduction. We felt that the fee component was a critical aspect, but we couldn't build legislative consensus without the ban component. So ultimately, we went with the hybrid. Next slide, please. One thing that our research and our debate showed was that a ban without a fee could have a negative consequence. That without a fee, and this was echoed to some degree in the New York State Task Force report, that there was no reduction in the waste that was generated as a result of single-use paper bags, which have their own environmental impact. And it was only a partial incentive to use reusable bags, which was our main aim, which was to change habits. Because there was no incentive for reducing the use of paper bags, we were also concerned about the impact, particularly to our small businesses, who we felt would be required to provide paper for free at an increased cost to them. So we felt it would hurt small businesses. Next slide, please. We also had the benefit of being able to look at national rollouts that resulted in effects other than were desired. Chicago, for example, did a plastic ban only with the 4 ml limit, and as a result to their ban, they ended up seeing an increased use in plastics as stores went to a higher plastic threshold in order to circumvent the ban. That's something I think we won't see in New York because there is no ml limit. But San Jose also amended to do the ban. Chicago pulled back their legislation and did a fee only, and they ultimately saw success as a result of their amendments. Next slide, please. So our law goes live on July 15th. One of the amendments that we made delays the enforcement. So January 1st, 2020 is when enforcement begins, and we're looking to the July through January period as an educational period. Next slide, please. Because we're substantially similar to the New York State law, we're expecting a smooth transition to the March enforcement. It's interesting, I'm glad to hear DECs because we've been looking for some clarity in terms of whether or not we would be preempted on allowing our fee to stand as we've legislated it, but Ulster County is absolutely committed to the fee, so I expect that we will be opting into the fee if required. If that's our only option, that's the way that we will proceed. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Tracey Bartels, the chair of the Ulster County Legislature, for that local perspective of what it was like to pass a local law just prior to the state enacting a law. With us now is Kara Hahn. Tracey mentioned Suffolk County's perspective, really more focused on behavioral economics. In other words, the county of Suffolk imposed a fee and on paper. And with us here to discuss the execution of that local law and what happened since January 1st of 2018, we do have Suffolk County Legislator Kara Hahn. Kara, are you with us?
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can. Thanks so much. As can over 100 people from across the state of New York. Thank you so much for joining us.
Excellent. Thank you for having me. I am the majority leader in the Suffolk County Legislature, and I also chair the legislature's Environment Committee. So this has been just incredibly important to me and to my colleagues. The success has been outstanding, and I'm thrilled to be able to talk about it. As with Ulster County, we had been talking about this for several years. While I don't have the exact date, there was a proposal back in the early 2000s that my predecessor, legislator Vivian Valoria Fisher, introduced with a fee for bags, and it didn't go anywhere. This bill that legislator Doc Spencer spearheaded and was the lead sponsor in Suffolk County was introduced in June of 2016. Prior to that, we had a bill to ban plastic, and that there just wasn't the votes for that. The legislator Spencer had done an enormous amount of work with the environmental community, supermarkets, labor unions, constituents, concerned citizens, and this negotiated bill was the 5-cent fee on plastic and paper bags. It was introduced in June of 2016. It passed in September of 2016. Obviously filed with the Secretary of State at the end of October in 2016, but took effect January 1st of 2018. So we are more than 1 year in. As the slide says, the results were pretty staggering. Plastic and paper bag use at stores has been reduced by over 80%. Suffolk County, according to counts by these stores, is using approximately 1.1 billion fewer plastic bags per year. The majority of consumers, it says here 62.6%, this is from the surveys that were taken, are bringing their own bag or opting for no bags. And we are finding less plastic bag litter on our beaches. So we can go on to the next slide. We obviously were working to change behavior, and this is just another way of showing that. This chart we have here, consumers have changed their behavior in 3 ways. They are switching to reusable bags. They are also opting for no bag on smaller purchases and even larger purchases. I myself often forget to bring my reusable bags into supermarkets. Still a year and a half later. But what I think I and many people have learned is you can just put your stuff back in the cart and roll it on out to the car without bags. So, you know, whether or not you remember your reusable bag at a supermarket with a cart, you can still get your products to your car where you might have left your bag. And many people recognize this. I see many people with 1 or 2 items just carrying them out. I do that myself, even at Macy's with a dress. And people, I think, are just really recognizing the importance of not using the plastic. The fee, however, was a huge motivator. And there's 2 parts to that, I believe. And this is from anecdotal, mostly, I would say. I want to say that I heard a lot of feedback from people who our 5 cents goes to the stores because the state wouldn't give us authority at the time when we had a different Senate. They wouldn't give us authority for a 5-cent fee. It would be considered a tax, and we didn't have the authority to do that. And so the workaround was the 5 cents goes to the stores. And there are quite a few residents would say, wow, you know, I would purchase that bag, but I don't want the store to get the money. But, you know, and that's exactly what we wanted them to do, was not to purchase the bag. So I think it wound up being, even though we wanted the 5 cents to go to a dedicated environmental fund, it wound up being an added incentive for people not to choose to buy the bag, because it was seen as not helping the environment in an additional way. There are going to be some folks on the phone who may not like the fact that I stated it that way, but I really got the sense from a lot of our feedback that the 5 cents, both charging it just to begin with, but then the fact that it wasn't going to an environmental fund made people think twice about buying the bags, whether they're plastic or paper. I think not having a fee on the paper, it not only do statistics show when you don't have the fee on the paper, it's not as successful, and I think Suffolk's would, our evidence would bear that out as well. it's a huge incentive or disincentive for folks to buy it, so, or to use the paper and to bring their own. I think we can move on to the next slide, which is just, you know, another visual demonstration of, you know, the success that we found. And there was, you know, I have to say, initially, the first 3, 4, 5 weeks, there's pushback. But after that, people get used to bringing their bags, get used to finding another way around it, and you really don't hear much about it anymore. It's one of those things where at first people are, you know, angry a little bit, but it goes away, and everyone, you see it. They bring their bags in, and it's really gratifying to all of us who worked hard to make it happen. And really, I think that's all I needed to say to talk about Suffolk's success and how dramatic it was.
Kara, thank you very much. That was Suffolk County Legislator, Majority Leader of the Suffolk County Legislature, Kara Hahn. And thank you so much for talking about the success of Suffolk County's local law that's been in effect since January 1st, 2018. We have some real hard data of what happened in Suffolk County. So we greatly appreciate the perspective of Kara Hahn. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Before we go to our industry representatives, I do want to take a couple of questions here that have come in. And I guess the first question I want to ask Jane McLaughlin and the folks from the Department of Environmental Conservation. One of the questions that has come in is, will the state be issuing any regulations or, to implement this statute or I guess administrative guidance to the counties and cities?
Hi, Stephen. Thanks. Yeah, the department, you know, we don't have draft regs or anything in the queue at this moment, but we do plan on issuing guidance FAQs of some kind in the near future to help answer questions that people might have in terms of implementing the ban and the fee at the local level. Yes, we'll provide some of that. Yep.
Okay, we're going to do some speed dating here, as I'm going to really fire through a couple of quick questions here before we bring in our industry retail partners in our communities. Will thick-based plastic bags be banned as well? I get the question is referring to single-use, thicker plastic carry-out bags, clothing stores and non-grocery stores. Are those types of bags banned?
So I think that's something that will likely be covered in the agency's guidance. You know, I will say that thicker millimeter plastic bags still pose the same environmental concerns that the thinner, you know, grocery carry-out bags pose to the environment. But we do plan on providing some additional clarity as to any other types of plastic bags that might fall within the ban itself.
Okay, will the state provide counties a prototype local law that includes the 5-cent fee for paper? And if so, when?
Are you talking about like a model law of some kind?
A model law, or is that you want something NYS to send out?
Well, we you know we don't have one drafted currently. I mean, you know, it is a local option, and we would, you know, given the authority to the localities at the counties and the cities to draft local legislation as they see fit, provided that it fits within the parameters of state law. You know, certainly, you know, if the organization has any questions and wants to work with us, you know, we're certainly willing to have that discussion, definitely.
Can a town or a village impose a bag fee?
So after March 1st, 2020, no. If there are, to the extent that there are any town or village local laws that are on the books prior to that date, they would be grandfathered in. However, if the county in which that town or village is located does enact a county law establishing a fee on paper bags, then they would have a year essentially to amend that local law accordingly, and they would not be able to charge a fee on paper.
Okay. The next question here is, does the state law address county fees preempted as of March 1st, 2020? I think you mentioned that it does. There is a preemption in there specifically on local laws with fees.
Are you talking about plastic bags specifically?
I would mention, yes, I would say both.
So
pre-existing paper bag
right.
fees, pre-existing paper bag fees.
So those local, if a county has a local law currently that establishes some sort of fee on paper, then by March 1st of 2020, that law should comport with the state ban, and so that would be a 5-cent fee on paper bags, and the fee would be distributed and broken out in such a way that the bags would be used by that county to purchase reusable bags for its communities. In terms of plastic, the ban, plastic bags are banned as of March 1st, 2020. So there would be no fee on plastic bags at that point.
What happens if a city waives the fee and the county enacts the fee?
So it is a local option. So it's not a waiver per se. So if the city elects not to adopt a city ordinance or city law establishing a fee, and the county does, then the county fee would apply within, the entirety of the county and the cities within that county.
Jane, if stores are providing exempt bags, do they still need to provide recycling take back? For example, pharmacies.
So if they are currently covered under the Recycling Act, that doesn't change, right? So even as of March 1st, 2020, if we mentioned pharmacies, if this particular pharmacy is currently required under state law to offer a mechanism for customers to come in and bring in their film plastic for recycling, they must continue to do so.
Jane, are certified compostable bags banned from distribution and or use by retail supermarkets?
So I think again, that's something, the types of plastic that aren't, I think, readily identifiable based on the language of the statute will be clarified further in some of our policy guidance. I don't know, Kayla, if you want to weigh in on the issue with the compostable bags.
Sure. So in terms of allowing compostable bags, so compostable bags pose a problem in terms of the film plastic recycling stream. So they are a contaminant to that stream, and they pose the same type of issues and problems to materials recovery facilities, so the recycling facilities, as regular plastic bag and film plastic. So that is an issue of concern for those types of bags.
But we will be, as part of our guidance, we will, provide some clarity and hopefully answer some additional questions on what types of bags we would consider to be plastic bags for purposes of the ban.
Just two more questions here. Enforcement of the 5-cent fee. Who is responsible for that? Is that a local government or a county, or is that an enforcement by a state agencies? And I guess as a parallel to that type of question is the distribution of the 2% back to the local government. How will that be returned back to the local government? Is it returned by way of sales tax? Is it returned in a different mechanism? You might not know the answer to that at this point in time, but we thought that question did come in, and so we thought we'd just put that out there just in case you had some inkling of how the state will handle that.
Well, the law does say that the state comptroller remits 40% of the fees on a monthly basis to the appropriate fiscal officer. So that's how the fee is given back to the locality that enacts the local law. And then any funds at the end of the fiscal year that have not been used are directed to the general fund in order to purchase reusable bags. You know, in terms of enforcement, I really think it sort of depends on, I guess, the nature of whatever issue there is or whatever potential violation. I think that's something that we'll probably have to give some thought to on our end. But that's certainly something that we can think about.
Okay, let's go to Mona Golub. Mona Golub is the Public Relations and Consumer Services at Price Chopper, which is a very large supermarket, grocery store in New York State and in the Northeast. And then followed by Mona, we're going to hear from Jason Wadsworth, the Packaging and Sustainability Manager for Wegmans. And now we can hear about the retailers' perspective and share some steps that they're talking about to comply with this new law. We'll start with Mona. And I guess one question that came in, Mona, I was going to ask Jane McLaughlin from the DEC, but perhaps you could react to it. How will the retail establishments deal with customers coming in with crates to carry out groceries? Do you care? Did the statute address this issue of using cardboard boxes to carry out groceries? Or, you know, those old milk crates that we all have, or soda crates that we have in our garages or basements? I imagine people will start to get pretty clever about how to carry out groceries. Do you care about that? Is that an issue of concern about what consumers will be using? In other words, if they're not using strictly reusable bags, but coming in with other carry-out mechanisms. Mona, are you there?
I am here, Steve. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
For more than a decade, we have been one of very few retailers in the state that has offered a 3-cent rebate for any reusable bag, box, tote that customers bring back to our store for reuse. So the answer is certainly we're amenable to whatever sustainable option customers bring to our store, provided that, you know, we don't see a sanitary issue. And we welcome whatever creative ideas that people have to sustainably transport their goods from our store back home.
Terrific. Thanks, Mona. Let's go to Mona. Did you have other reactions that you want to discuss with the folks here? We have over 100 people all across the state right now, sort of a perspective of this new statute, steps you're taking to comply with the new law, or initiatives that you had already underway with respect to the use of single-use plastic bags.
Well, at Price Chopper Market 32 participated in our first bag ban about 7 years ago, and we've advocated for diminishing reliance on disposable bags ever since. Now, I think we can all agree that the banning of plastic bags is a substantive move in the right direction, you know, and not just a soundbite with which to float an Earth Day press conference. But changing what has been a 40-year entitlement of convenience for so many can't happen in a vacuum, considering many of the connected and or residual consequences, which are not necessarily contained or clarified in the law as currently written. Thoughtfully planning for those is what will dictate long-term success beyond the headline. Some of the items that have been left open and are a cause for concern is the patchwork created by the county opt-in, opt-out clause, as it potentially threatens the noble intent of the law and disrupts the level playing field required to achieve an effective outcome. We also have some concern about the lack of universal consumer education, given the state's access to powerhouse environmental groups. We see an opportunity to be a part of a universal education that can be extended to small, medium, and large size retailers. So we're all speaking from the same page and clarifying the same messages. And the absence of a detailed plan to equip those on government assistance remains a concern of ours. I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that the nickels collected are not found money. The retailers have already paid more than a nickel for each of those paper bags. We are seeking some further clarification on certain points of the law's language, mostly related to exemptions and to effectuating municipal action. But when plastic bags are banned, as other speakers on the call this morning have mentioned, many presume they should be replaced by handleless paper bags. Well, knowing what we do about the destructive carbon footprint of paper, it makes a strong case for decreasing reliance on them as well. So in answer to the question, paper or plastic, the right answer is neither. Disposable bags are not the long-term solution. The ultimate policy goal should encourage the best long-term solution: heavy-duty reusable bags, boxes, and totes, which last for years and sustain hundreds of uses. And fortunately or unfortunately, the brunt of the responsibility for driving these long-term results beyond the planning or banning of plastic bags appears to fall to county leadership and retailers, meaning you and me. So what are we going to do, and how are we going to ensure that paper bags don't replace plastic bags, thereby trading one environmental misstep for another? Currently, 89% of customers use disposable plastic bags, while 1% ask for paper. As I reported to you in the webinar in June, using 15 years of data related to our 3-cent rebate we give customers for bringing reusables back to our store, we know that 90% of the population in New York State is not in a reusable mindset. So there's going to need to be a deterrent that makes paper a less attractive alternative. And without a deterrent, the demand for paper is likely to increase by 5,000 to 10,000% overnight. Given that paper bags triple our cost of doing business versus plastic, and that the legislation offers no opportunity for relief or offset to those of us who bear the brunt of that increase, we know that our front-end wrap expense in New York might well increase by more than $5 million in this first year, driven by the rise of yet another disposable bag. And what a lost opportunity that would be. Even though the legislation doesn't call for it, we, government, retail, consumers, and environmental advocates, must continue to work collaboratively to progress our communities forward away from disposables, both paper and plastic, and toward reusables. So our plan, which is already in progress, includes continuing to be progressive in our thinking, as we've been with other issues, item pricing, bottle bill over the years, and extending a collaborative hand to all who prioritize long-term sustainable goals. We're committed to continuing recycling and consumer education. We want to collaboratively solve for those on government assistance rather than make loose exceptions that fail to incent sustainable behavior, requiring us to hand out disposable bags in perpetuity. We are intending to pursue discussion on this front and welcome anybody who wants to be a part of that. It's not enough to say that exemptions will be made or that bags will be given out by yet unnamed sources after the law takes effect. Collaborative solutions should be sought now in advance of March 1. We want to elevate the conversation around reusables and develop a thoughtful strategy that above all promotes their accessibility and affordability. We want to incent our customers, as we have been, but even more so with discounts and rewards, to help them get a jump on the law by equipping themselves with long-term heavy-duty alternatives. We're going to continue to rethink heavy-duty reusables as facilitative brand-building merchandise that delivers a forward-thinking message and not just as an item that we sell. We need to figure out how to curb the inevitable disappointment that customers experience when using paper bags if they opt to use them transitionally. And for those who use thin film single-use plastic bags and waste cans or as poop bags, for those who do use them more than once, twice I think, we'll look to stock alternatives of each in the wrap set. Of course, we'll ensure that we have the right mix of heavy-duty reusable bags available in terms of size, material, pricing, and branding, and that we maintain consistent inventory at store level. Some of the actions that fall to us as a cost of doing business and that we willingly accept are designing and erecting a portfolio of call to action banners and signage that would encourage the behavioral change that needs to transpire. We put those on the light poles in our parking lots, on our cart corrals, on our store facades, our fourth walls at the front of the store, and of course right at the register. We've merchandised heavy duty bags strategically and consistently throughout our stores where customers expect to find them. We need to thoughtfully redesign our front-end bagging stations to accommodate the packing of paper bags as well as a variety of reusable bags, boxes, and totes. We need to reprogram our self-driven easy scans to accommodate all of those varieties as well, and train all of our cashiers to better understand the options and how they need to come through the register. We need to develop asset protection and front-end training protocols around the purchase versus the reuse of heavy-duty bags and alternatives, both at the register and at our easy scans. We need to develop front-end protocols that gift paper bags to SNAP and WIC recipients who by law will be exempt from paying a nickel for them in a way that doesn't create a stigma. Maybe we pack the bags first, verify the mode of payment, then charge or exempt. We need to develop a consumer education campaign that extols the virtues of heavy-duty long-term solutions. And as I said earlier, we'd love to do that with some of the experts that are connected directly to the state. We just launched a new campaign on Earth Day to drive consumers toward reusables, away from disposables, paper or plastic, neither. We'll continue to add substance to that message and make compelling propositions to the customer. It's much less expensive to invest in heavy-duty reusables that you'll own and use for 5 to 10 years versus buying disposables every time you shop. And frankly, we're really curious to see if the results of this law are anywhere near as effective as the Suffolk County law, which was a model of success and converted more than 80% of its residents in less than half a year. Thank you.
Mona, thank you very much for sharing your perspective from Price Chopper Market 32. We encourage everybody who's listening in to continue sending us your questions. Because we've reached the 11 o'clock mark, we'll end with Jason Wadsworth's presentation and then produce an FAQ with answers to all of the outstanding questions. So with this, I'll turn it over to Jason Wadsworth, who is the Packaging and Sustainability Manager for Wegmans, a large retailer in Western New York. Jason, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. To keep my comments brief, I could just say ditto to Mona's comments. She did such a good job explaining the issues that we're faced here. Let me just add that no one has really thought of the transportation impact and infrastructure impact of paper bags. From experience in our Massachusetts markets, we have seen when a plastic bag ban went into effect, the move to paper was almost immediate. And if we don't get out in front of this, it's going to be very difficult to get customers back away from paper into a durable, reusable bag. So when you talk about transportation impacts, if people move from plastic to paper, you're going to see, with an estimate, 23 billion plastic bags used in New York, over 70,000 additional trucks on the road in New York State to transport paper bags to the store and then away from the customer's recycle bin or to the landfill, where they will take up more space. So we've traded off some issues for a whole nother set of issues, which I don't need to repeat here. What Wegmans is committed to doing, much like Price Chopper, is to engage our communities, work together to get the message of reusing out versus single use. And we are definitely in favor of any incentive that makes paper not the obvious choice, for all the reasons that were mentioned before. So we look forward to engaging with our community partners in counties to help get that message out. It has to be a partnership because, you know, the onus right now is on supermarkets to carry this message to our customer. And the more sound bites, the more messages that we can convey, the better the reminder is going to be that reusable is the clear choice here. Wegmans has decided not to wait until March 2020 to remove plastic bags from our stores. We're going to get started now and this summer make that transition, because our customer is going to have a tough time with all the noise that's going to be around March 2020, getting the message of reuse. And we're going to help them make that transition. We're going to learn from our customers and our employees on how to manage all of the different types of reusables that we're going to see coming through. The question was asked, you know, will we take boxes and crates, et cetera? Absolutely. And I think it's imperative that we understand early how to use those through our front ends. Paper's hard for everybody. It weighs a lot. Our employees are going to have to carry 50-pound bales of paper around in the stores, and that's a huge issue from a safety perspective for us. We have a lot to learn, and I'll end on that note, as well as we continue to look forward to interacting and making this a collaborative journey.
Jason, thank you so much for joining us from Wegmans, and thank you to everybody who tuned in. We had almost 100 county officials on the phone today. Thank you to our sponsor, Beyond Green. Thank you again to our participants. We will create an FAQ with all of the outstanding questions and make that available to everybody who tuned in today. We'll also make a recording of this webinar available for those that weren't able to join us live. Thank you again, and have a great day.